So the Joker kills Batman and blows up Los Angeles, and this is going to be one of the coolest stories ever when it comes to the Joker. The ending of this is nuts, and I'm really curious to see how you guys feel about the ending of this whole thing. So what this does is this initially picks up basically in Gotham City, right? And it says 4 days ago. Now, the comic is on a timeline in the sense that things take place, right, over the course of a set period of time. It's not overly important, so I wouldn't really stress about that too much. But you've basically just kind of got, like, this mob boss who's eating some food. And then, like, this guy comes in with his throat slit, just bleeding all over the place. There's, like, human body parts in the mob boss's food, like ears and stuff like that. But when they get in there, what they end up finding is that, like, the Joker and his gang are basically chopping people up and then putting pieces of them in the food, which is the most insane and Joker thing ever. Now, here's where everything gets nuts, because what the Joker does is he snatches up all these guys, right? This mob boss and his henchmen and so on and so forth, and then basically brings his own guys, his clown forces, if you want to call them that, to meet with like Two-Face and Black Mask and Edward Nigma in these guys, right? Now, if you don't know who like Black Mask or Edward Nigma, the Riddler, or Two-Face are, well, I don't know what to tell you because they're some of the most iconic Batman villains ever. But the long and short of this is that it's really just the Joker kind of making a stance. The reason why is because the Joker's been out of the Batman comics and out of Gotham City for quite some time. He's been gone. Now, a combination of this comes out of the Batman Joker War story, which was done by James Tynion, as well as the Joker's own solo series. But the reality here is that with him having been gone, what basically took place here is the Joker's henchmen only ever went one of two ways. Either they joined other supervillain groups, or they stayed loyal to the Joker and they were killed. And so what the Joker's doing is by showing back up here, trying to make this case that like, the Joker's back, everybody needs to listen to me. Now, here's the thing about this, right? Two-Face, Riddler, Black Mask, these guys, they're not worried about the Joker anymore. And there was a time when that wasn't the case. There was a time in Gotham City where whenever the Joker showed up, whether it was Batman or anybody else that had to deal with him, they were on some level terrified of what the Joker was capable of. Criminals were more scared of him than Batman was, but everybody shared some measure of fear because, as Kevin Conroy said in Batman the Animated Series, the Joker's schemes make sense to nobody but himself. And so as he does this, he starts executing these different guys, but because the various villains here just aren't really buying into his shtick, they quite literally run him out of town. They tell him, like, you've got X amount of days to get out of Gotham, right? Because if you decide you want to stay here, we're going to come for you and we are going to kill you. Now, one of the crazy things that goes on here is that there is a guy with a mask on his head. And this guy seems to be of particular interest because there's a kind of monologue here where he talks about how he thought he was going to survive this and everything was going to be okay, right? It seemed touch and go for a few seconds. And then one of the henchmen draws attention to the guy in the mask. And of course, Joker ends up shooting that guy. And so as the henchmen of the Joker are dumping this guy's body into the ground, he suddenly wakes up, like literally just starts breathing. After getting shot in the face, this guy just starts breathing. So of course they panic, they freak out, and they basically take off. Now at this point, we switch over to the city of Los Angeles, which is where the Joker's traveled to. Now, if you're not familiar with Joker in Batman comics, it probably seems a little strange to see this happen. This is not uncommon. And in fact, back during the 1970s and 1980s in the Joker comics, there was a point where he traveled to the Middle East. So it's not uncommon to see Joker leaving the city of Gotham and traveling to different locations. 9 times out of 10, it's done for the pursuit of a greater cause, which is rooted in Gotham. In this instance, he's basically moving to LA. And as he's talking to one of the guys here, one of the things that he's told is like, so Los Angeles is not like Gotham City. Sure, we have like masks and we've got people who do crazy and wonky things, but we're a respectable town, or at least as respectable as Hollywood possibly can be. But when the Joker tells them like, I don't want your permission to be here and I don't want your town, I simply want your office, the Joker grabs him and just throws him out of the building, right? And he's just like, your office belongs to me now. So like, that's the end of that guy. Now, switching over to the Man in the Mask, one of the things he does is he travels to Arkham Asylum. Now, this is kind of a little bit of an important thing because we'll learn more about this guy here in a minute, but he's probably one of the most important characters in the story, right? So keep that guy in the back of your head. But from here, we jump back to LA, and the Joker literally addresses the entirety of the country. He hijacks the news airwaves across the United States and just starts broadcasting everywhere. And what he says here is he's like, good evening, ladies and gentlemen, or good morning, or whatever time of the day it is for you. I am the Joker, and if you haven't heard of me, well, I'm the Clown Prince of Crime in Gotham City. And he talks about how, like, when he went there and tried to return, the different villains basically ran him out, but they also helped him to realize that his brand of comedy is something that the rest of the world is missing, right? The rest of the country is missing. That sure, the country's divided politically and socially and so on, but the Joker has the cure for what ails us. So he's gonna bring laughter and joy to everybody across the United States, whether you want it or not. And the funny thing about this is that like Harley Quinn sees this, Lex Luthor sees this, everybody sees what's going on here, and it turns attention to everybody. But the person that really focuses on all of this is Jason Todd. Now, before we get to him, because we'll talk about him here in a minute, he's very important to this story. Before we get to him, we pick up with the man in the mask. Right? Now, this guy makes his way to a bar, and then he ends up going to the bathroom in that bar. But once he gets in there, there's this guy who's like shooting up, and he's like, dude, the bathroom's occupied, and the man in the mask is like, dude, not too worried about that, man. It looks like there's 2 of us in here now, that kind of thing. Not really taking the situation seriously. So where this guy who's shooting up goes to try to stab the man in the mask, the guy in the mask gouges his eyes out of his head, and then takes the knife of the dude who was shooting up and starts cutting the mask off of his face, only for us to find out it's the Joker. So there's 2 Jokers running around. There's the one in Los Angeles, and then there's the one here. I told you it was gonna get crazy. Like, I told you the story was gonna get nuts, and it only gets better. It only gets better. Like, it just gets ridiculously good. And so at this point, we switch over to Jason Todd, who shows up at the bar to basically investigate the deaths of one of the people here. Now, for those of you guys who are unfamiliar with this, you're probably asking yourself, where's Batman, right? Isn't Batman the guy who chases the Joker? And under normal circumstances, you would be right. It would usually be Batman. But the history between the Joker and Jason Todd is a very personal history. So back in the 1970s and 80s, DC had a story called Death in the Family, where literally the Joker killed Jason Todd. He beat him with a crowbar and then blew him up. Now, of course, Jason Todd ended up returning to life because it's comic books and that kind of stuff happens. But ever since then, Jason Todd has had a vendetta against the Joker and has always been trying to kill him. It's one of the big differences between the Red Hood and Batman. Batman believes that while villains can't always be redeemed, they deserve a chance at that, right? So he has this no-kill rule. Jason Todd doesn't have that, man. Jason Todd will shoot you on the spot, ask no questions, and leave. Like, that's literally what he is, man. He's like the Punisher of the Batman family. It's pretty amazing. But following that, of course, the Joker ends up basically putting on a kind of makeshift outfit for himself, a hood, that kind of thing, to keep his identity secret. He doesn't want anybody to know who he is. And he's just sort of making his way around the city of Gotham. Now, he'll be doing that for a little while. We'll kind of see him intermittently over the course of this. But by and large, a lot of the story begins to shift over in the direction of what's basically Red Hood hunting for the Joker, as well as the fake Joker who's in the city of Los Angeles. And so one of the things that happens is that with this Joker that's out there, right, presumably the fake Joker, that when he's out there, one of his guys starts talking to him about what's going on in Gotham City. And where this Joker's like, what are you talking about? His response is, there's a Joker in Gotham City who's running around and just killed a guy like a day or 2 ago. So it looks like there's 2 of you out there. Now, the Hollywood Joker, we'll call him Joker 2. Joker 2 is just kind of like, all right, here's the thing, man. Are you telling me that I'm not really the Joker? Is that really the argument that you're making here? And for the most part, his henchmen know well enough to know not to challenge him. But of course, the line's been crossed. And the Joker helps this guy finish with all his living by pushing his head into a fish tank and then shooting him in the back of the head. And like that's it. He just kills him on the spot. And so Joker 1, that's the one that we'll call the man who was previously in the mask, that Joker 1 ends up meeting with a guy named Cardiff. Now, Cardiff was at one point one of his top henchmen. But of course, Cardiff spills the beans and says, after you were gone, all the different henchmen, again, either sided with you staying loyal and were killed, or they joined different villains from across the landscape. But whatever the case is, the numbers that you had at your side are completely and totally dwindled. There really isn't anybody else left here. And so Cardiff basically extends a kind of olive branch by saying, you know, feel free to peruse the closet and throw some clothes on and that kind of a thing. And so what it does is it switches over to one of the henchmen who saw everything popping off with Joker 1. And then, of course, he's spilling the beans to the forces of the Riddler. And that's when Jason Todd shows up and says, like, no one's seen the Joker since he took off to LA. This guy's saying that he's seen a Joker here. These things aren't adding up. Let the guy talk. Now, of course, Red Hood's not necessarily welcome here, so they initially attack him, and then, of course, Red Hood helps them understand their place in the bigger picture and starts beating the crap out of all of them. But the other thing about this is that Joker 1 ends up traveling to meet Harley Quinn. Now, can we all just admit how amazing it is that when Harley Quinn answers the door, she's got like this whole Supergirl getup, and the first thing she does is just like beat Joker 1 over the head with a baseball bat, and then as soon as this guy's unconscious, she basically ties him up. Now, this is when things start to get murky, because up to this point, we can make a legitimate case that Joker 1 is the real Joker in Gotham, and Joker 2 in Los Angeles is the fake Joker. But this is where Harley Quinn, and even Matthew Rosenberg, who's writing the story, this is when they start to throw a wrench in the works. Because one of the things that happens is that as Joker 1 is talking to Harley Quinn starts calling him out, and she basically says, like, you're not the Joker. I don't know why you're dressed up like the Joker, but you are not the Joker. And when he asked the question, he says, why are you saying that? She says, because the Joker would never come and see me. That would never, ever, ever, ever happen. The Joker mistreated me, he hated me, right? He seemed to love me, he was a psychopath, right? His emotions were all over the place. Plus, you've got a gunshot in the head, and that just seems a little strange. So the result of this is that she actually lets him go, right? And he ends up just kind of going back out there. And it seems really based more on pity than anything else, because if he was the real Joker, Harley Quinn never would have let him go in that way. And that's where things get kind of funny, because even Joker 1 himself kind of comes to this question that he has: am I really not the Joker? Like, am I not the actual Joker? And so it's really fun in terms of how this is being played as far as head games go. Because for those of you guys who are familiar with Joker mythos in the last few years, one of the stories that we got was called 3 Jokers, but it wasn't like this. It was just 3 different versions of the Joker, and each one had their own personality, and they all actually more or less operated together. In this instance, you've got a couple different Jokers running around, and each one of them believes that they're the real Joker. So that's where things get really fun here. Now at this point, Red Hood catches up to the Joker, and this is one of the biggest faults of Jason Todd as a character. So for those of you guys who are familiar with Batman, one of the things you guys know is Batman is very methodical. He thinks a lot. He processes a lot of things. He's not reckless. He doesn't just jump in and start doing things. Jason Todd is in a lot of ways the opposite, and he kind of always has been. He's always been reckless. And so when he confronts the Joker, instead of just killing him on the spot, he literally starts talking to the Joker, and the Joker starts talking to him. He's kind of savoring the moment where he finally has the upper hand on the Joker himself and can basically kill him. The downside of this is that Joker uses the opportunity to jump off what is basically a scaffold and then lands in the water. Now, where Harley Quinn dismisses it and says, 1, that's not the real Joker, and 2, that guy's probably dead, Jason Todd has to know. He has to know whether or not it's the actual Joker, and he has to know whether or not he's actually dead. And so at that point, Joker 1 wakes up in Gotham City River, right? Like literally like emerges from the river. There's a couple of homeless guys there. He probably kills one of them and then takes their coat because he makes a comment on how nice their coat is. That's one of the things about the Joker, is that he'll be like, man, that's a really nice coat. And then it'll cut to a different scene, and then he's wearing the coat, so he most likely killed the guy. But Joker 1 shows up at Gotham General. Now, when he shows up here with the hood over his head and the homeless man's cloak and so on, he looks like a vagrant. So it's very easy for everybody to just kind of overlook him and not take him seriously. But he ends up basically taking one of the bodies that's basically a dead woman, and then takes the doctor with him and drags them into the room, reveals his identity to the doctor, and then starts talking about how he thinks he's poisoned, right? He was poisoned and he's not feeling very good, that kind of a thing. And the doctor kind of runs over these symptoms, albeit in a state of high duress, right? Like, are you vomiting and all that kind of stuff? Please don't kill me, so on and so forth. And so the Joker's like, no, I mean, I don't have any trouble breathing. I'm not really vomiting consistently or anything like that, you know? And the result of the doctor is like, well, then I doubt that you're poisoned, right? There must be something else going on. So then the Joker kind of makes this statement, well, then either you need to figure it out and give me some anti-poison pills or something, or I'm gonna blow this whole place up with a bomb, right? Like that kind of a thing. And because no one ever really knows for sure whether or not the Joker's telling the truth, no one's stupid enough to question it. So the doctor basically goes along with it. And literally Joker pops these things and says, I hope they work. And he's like, I still have this crazy headache. And the doctor's like, well, it might be caused by something else. And the Joker's like, well, it's probably this gunshot in my head, right? This bullet in my head. So of course, following that, literally the doctor ends up performing makeshift surgery on the Joker in this place by essentially removing the bullet and then like bandaging him up and the whole 9 yards. And so following that, the Joker basically ends up like trying to find a way out of the hospital. The problem is that the cops were alerted to the Joker's presence when he was here. And so the cops are like surrounding the place. Red Hood shows up on the scene. And so seemingly there's no way out of here. He ends up just trying to make his way through the hospital in order to find some alternate route of escape. Now, the funny thing about this is that because he looks like he's dressed up like the doctor, he's being approached by nurses and stuff, and then of course basically takes off, but ends up in a room full of these dying kids, right? These sick kids. And I wouldn't go as far as to say that you get a super touching moment with the Joker. The Joker's never really been sentimental unless he's reliving these moments that he considers to be beautiful when he was like beating Jason Todd to death or something along those lines. And in fact, his physical appearance scares the crap out of these kids. But what's so funny about this is that he's able to kind of relate to them on a personal level, where he kind of starts telling the story about how he basically came back only to find out that somebody had stolen his identity and that kind of a thing. It's all from his perspective. It's all from this idea that like Joker 2 out in LA is not the real Joker, that this guy, Joker 1, is the absolute Joker. He genuinely believes that he's the Joker. That's the irony here though, because Joker 2 believes he's the real Joker. So it's kind of like, which one is the real one, right? Which one is is which. And like I said, the ending of this is going to absolutely blow your mind. And so what goes on here is that where he's relating to these kids and really even able to gain their trust to a degree by trying to be funny and cracking some jokes and different things like that, when one of the cops comes barging into the room and asks them, have you seen a guy who's got like really pale skin and he's got some crazy looking eyes, a horrifying smile, green hair? The response to the kids is like, we haven't really seen anybody like that here. Can you change me because I made a mess? And of course the cop ends up leaving. And so as the Joker leaves, he gives these kids these parting words of wisdom where he says, by the way, kids, get some new toys, right? Parents never say no to a dying child, which, if I'm being honest with you, is probably one of the darkest comments that I've ever heard the Joker make. And I know it doesn't seem that way, but it's like parents who go through this kind of thing, it is incredibly traumatizing, and parents just want to spend as much time with their kids as they can, and they want their kids to be happy. But the Joker, to a degree, just kind of giving these kids advice and saying like, just get better toys from your parents, right? They're not going to say no. It's just kind of dark. I don't know why, but it just feels really, really dark. But in the midst of all this, of course, the Joker ends up taking out one of the cops by helping him finish with all his living, and then dons his costume. Now, that's one of the things that I hope you notice about this, is the Joker's a lot more intelligent than people give him credit for. But I think a lot of that is because the nature of the Joker's stories is that oftentimes they involve him doing these crazy, obnoxious schemes, like trying to copyright fish. But when you break the Joker down and you look at the kind of stunts he's pulled off, the level of intelligence and ingenuity necessary to do that is pretty insane. And so, of course, as the Joker is trying to make his way out, being dressed as a cop, he's suddenly met by Red Hood, and he immediately books it. Now, of course, he ends up basically stumbling into a room. There's another cop in there. This cop does not know the other cop is the Joker in disguise. So when Jason Todd comes running up, the cop tells him, lower your gun. And in that momentary distraction, Joker 1 pulls a gun on this cop and then uses him as a hostage in order to get away from Jason Todd. So you've got this kind of like eking along situation where the Joker's like slowly walking backward with this hostage, and Jason Todd is slowly like following him with a gun pointed at him, but he ultimately tells him, get rid of the gun or I'm gonna kill this guy on the spot. Now, this is one of those moments with Jason Todd where I'm not exactly sure how I feel, because with like a story like Under the Red Hood, when Jason Todd first came back and he was very much the vigilante taking over the criminal underworld kind of character, he wouldn't have cared. He would have shot the Joker, and if this cop happened to be killed when the Joker died and his body reflexed and pulled the trigger, well, you know, that happens sometimes, right? You can't make an omelet without breaking a few eggs. That was his philosophy. And whether it's because Jason Todd has been spending time with Batman, whatever the case happens to be, that he ultimately ends up throwing his gun away. And this gives the Joker the chance to get away. Now, at this point, we transition over to one of the coolest moments in the story when the Joker busts into what used to be one of his safe houses, which is now occupied by Jervis Tetch, right? Also known as the Mad Hatter in DC Comics. You could also call him Jervis Tech, people call him that as well. But basically, because it was one of the Joker's safe houses, when he does bust in here, he's dressed up like Batman, which is kind of amazing. And I'm not gonna lie to you guys, I really hope people dress up this way at Comic-Cons, like they cosplay as like Joker Batman. I don't know what you would call him. What would you call him? Leave a comment down below and tell me, what would you call this version of Batman that the Joker's pretending to be? But regardless, what he says is like, this used to be one of his safe houses. So what he wants to know is how Jervis found this place in the first place. And what Jervis tells him is that Joker 2 gave it to him, and that he's back in Gotham and he's not happy with Joker 1, right? That like literally he's basically saying, you are not the real Joker, and the real Joker's here, and the real Joker's pissed. So again, it's a really, really cool moment. And so at this point, this story comes to its head, right? Where basically Joker 1 meets Joker 2. That with Joker 1 being told by Jervis that Joker 2 is in Gotham City, Joker 1 is able to track him down. And he shows up basically dressed as a fireman. Now, the fact that he's dressed in just a ridiculous outfit really just kind of all but tells us this is the real Joker. And even just the exchange between the two, right? Joker 1 showing up here, like literally he's just like, so you're gonna tell me what I wanna know. And you're gonna tell me why you're impersonating me, why you're pretending to be me. But Joker 2's like, I mean, it's gonna be kind of a hard sell to get me to give you that information when you're literally locked in an elevator and you've got nothing but a water gun in your hands. But then he starts sniffing the air and he's like, what in the heck is that smell? And the response to Joker 1 is, oh yeah, I set the building on fire on my way up. That right there tells us it's the real Joker. I mean, that right there, like just that tells us it's the actual Joker, because it's something the real Joker would do. It's absolutely something the actual Joker would do. Set the building on fire so both of them are gonna burn alive, and then take the elevator up, so there's presumably no real way out of here. And so that's when Joker 2's like, you're absolutely insane. So as the two of them have this conversation, the whole guise of Joker 2 begins to falter. It begins to drop off, and it's not really the Joker at all. It's just a person masquerading as the Joker. All pretense is gone. And so ultimately what ends up happening here is that as the two of them are confronting one another, that what goes on is Joker 1 ends up basically pulling out his water gun and then spraying Joker 2 in the face, only for us to find out that it's not water, it's acid. And he literally says, just because it's a water gun doesn't mean you can't put other things inside of it, other liquids, which is kind of a crazy idea. And so Joker 2 literally just like flees, just runs as fast as he can, jumps out of the building, and ends up making his escape. And so Joker 1 ends up using the pistol and then spraying the locks on the elevator, and then basically making his escape. And so with Joker 2 basically descending down into the sewers, Joker 1 follows him. And when Joker 1 finds Joker 2, he's literally just leaned against the wall, terrified for his life, right? Absolutely horrified. And he's like, I didn't sign up for any of this, right? So this guy's been hired by somebody, but he's like, I didn't sign up for any of this. This is not what I wanted to be a part of, and none of this was the bargain. And he even goes so far as to reveal who it was that he was hired by, only for him to be shot and killed by Red Hood. Red Hood literally just like runs up on the drain and just fires the shot off on Joker and kills him on the spot. And so at that point, Joker 1 ends up fleeing. But the problem is that when the cops get down into the subway system, Joker 2's nowhere to be found. He's gone. And Joker 1 didn't take him anywhere, so basically Joker 2's not dead, which really begs the question, how is it possible that Joker 2 could be shot in the eye, like in the face? How is that possible he could be shot in the face and he could survive? Well, this is where the ending comes that absolutely blows things away. So what ends up happening here is we transition to Malibu, California, and you have a phone call between the Joker and the person who was portraying Joker 2, which turns out to be no one other than Clayface. And I was just like, what? Like, as soon as I saw that, I was like, no way that's the case. Like, that's crazy. And so because of that, like, the beans are spilled. This is the guy who was pretending to be Joker 2. And so what this means is there's like 3 Jokers running around, right? Joker 1 was the guy that had a bullet in his head that had surgery done on him by the doctor, right? The guy who was originally in the mask. Joker 2 is basically Clayface, who was pretending to be the Joker and then took off out to LA saying he was going to quote unquote fix the world. And then there's like Joker 3, right? Who's this Joker here in Malibu. Here's the twist. Here's the kicker to all of this, right? This Joker who's in Malibu, this is the one that actually showed up. This is the actual Joker 2. This is the one that showed up in LA and said he was going to fix the country, that he was going to make everything better again. That Two-Face showing up in the city of Gotham was done by Joker in Malibu, right? Like, that was literally orchestrated by him. His instruction was, there is a Joker, right? Joker 1, there's a Joker running around the city of Gotham pretending to be me. You are going to pretend to be me in the city of Gotham, and you're gonna weed this guy out. I'm going to stay here in the city of Los Angeles, and I'm going to quote unquote make the country better. And so that's the crazy thing, is because now we've basically only got 2 Jokers again, right? So we can kind of revert back to Joker 1 and Joker 2 because that's all we really have. But Joker 1, we don't see him again, right? At least not within this video. Joker 2 is the one that we want to focus on because as he's in LA, the entirety of Los Angeles just rejected him, right? I mean, they were like, we don't want to have you around here. Like, that's ridiculous. You have no role to play in here at all. And so what he got so frustrated about is that because of the fact that the city of Los Angeles seemingly rejected him at every turn, his ultimate goal is to go back to Gotham, weed out Joker 1, destroy that guy once and for all. But before he does, he has a parting gift for the city of LA. He literally just starts shooting up police precincts, blowing them apart. I mean, just mayhem, right? Just killing people all over the place. And then one of the things that ends up happening, because cops are looking for him everywhere. I mean, literally, this guy just blows up Los Angeles is basically what it does. And so as he's trying to like make his escape and like the cops are all hunting for him and everything, he's kind of sneaking along, and then he ends up coming across what he thinks is Batman, right? Like, he's just kind of there, and Batman's like what are you doing here, right? And then he realizes it's not an actual Batman. It's one of the people who dress up and pretend to be Batman in order to get like pictures taken and stuff like that in downtown LA, out in front of the Chinese theater. And so because of that, like this guy's like, here's what's gonna happen. If you're gonna operate on my turf and we're gonna get pictures together, we're doing a 70-30 revenue split. I take 70% of all the money you make, right? Like literally it's a shakedown, right? It's like, and here's the question I have. Is that how it works out there? Is that how things get done out there? I've always been kind of curious about that. But what ends up happening is like in the middle of all that, there's like this couple who comes along and they're like, hey, can you take a picture with us? Right, like, can we do a picture? And initially they ask for Spider-Man instead of the Joker. And like literally Batman's like, well, Spider-Man's in rehab. So of course they basically can't have a picture with Spider-Man. You end up getting it with the Joker, but the Joker's kind of confused and baffled about everything that's going on. And so the husband's just kind of like, I mean, the Joker looks a little weird here, right? The clown looks strange. Can you make it look like he's actually fighting? Like, you know, there's an actual conflict going on. And the Joker's like, yeah, how about this? And he pulls a gun and puts it to the head of the fake Batman. So the fake Batman is scared out of his wits. So the picture gets taken and then Joker blows the Batman's head off. Like literally blows his head off. And it's just kind of like, well, that was fun. That was great. You know, you guys have a lovely vacation. Enjoy yourselves. Make sure you have a good time. And I will catch you later. But in the middle of all this, before he can make his escape, he's suddenly set upon by a character he's never seen before. Simply refers to her as a strange lady in red. But before we give you an explanation about her, we're bringing this video to an end. Thank you guys for watching. Let me know what you think down in the comments section, and I will catch you all later. Peace.